After running to grab some supplies in the medical bay, the doctor's other assistants handed them over to the two who decided to take care of Markwell. They put him in a stretcher and took him inside, while me and the doctor watched. We both made our way to the other side, so we could watch the procedure from the dark glass. His assistant stayed behind, in order to help my man when they would return with Trollope and Stevenson. We sat as the two men strapped Markwell, who suffered intense seizures, to the table's top with the belts and special tapes. Jankowski reminded me they were no medical doctors, or even nurses for all that matters, so they were bound to make everything worse.
Fools,
he told me.
The camera moved slightly, almost as if someone shook while holding it.
Well, they should have listened to the goddamn man. After applying some drugs to him through his arm, Markwell seemed to have stopped. They checked his pulse, and after some scared faces, they showed a great deal of relief. I got up. I was about to leave and check on my man.
Wait,
he said, while holding back into my chair, his eyes stuck to the scene. Our man here clearly had a better guess on what was to come than anyone else. Sadly, we couldn't do anything else, really. After a couple more minutes of quiet, one of his assistants, Sladowicz he told me was his name, knocked on the door, probably asking to leave. The man outside did not respond. We stood there some more, as Markwell was seemingly passed out and Sladowicz and his friend talked. I checked on my watch. It had been 43 minutes. I wondered, where were my men? But as I stared at my watch, I heard laughter. Very loud laughter. I quickly turned up, and it seemed to be coming from Markwell. It didn't seem to make sense, because he apparently was still passed out. His lips didn't move at all, as his eyes bulged open in a disgusting way. I looked at the doctor. He was now standing, his hand by his mouth and his eyes wide open.
So, that's what those were for?
He said, mesmerized. But as he realized that, he turned to me in panic and inquired if he had locked the door. I eased him and told him that it was completely locked. No one was going to leave. I asked him what was wrong.
Markwell is dead,
he said.
He's being used. Those two fools got themselves killed, and they have no one else to blame but themselves. The camera shook harder.
I didn't quite get it at the moment. I didn't read the whole report, just a quick look through. The most I knew had been told to me by the doctors on the... what do you call it? Oh, yes. Specimen. He told me he only laid out what was obviously on the highest interest, and that some of the less explicable details he left in an addendum for easier verification later, as it had been sent to DC. One of those details were the tendrils, he said. But as he tried to explain the details, the laughter coming out from Markwell started to become louder and louder.
The general looked down, his hand covering his mouth.
He shook and trembled, but this time it was not much like a seizure. The men in the room ran to inject him with medicine again, not entirely sure what to do now. His belly forced itself up as the laughs became unbearable, followed by his chest, and then...
his eyes wide open, stuck to the floor.
His head burst open, splattering blood all over the room.
He had now paused, as sweat ran down his head.
Both men screamed for help. The door didn't budge. Jankowski watched as I turned. He said he didn't expect it to be that much. As the other assistant slammed the door, calling for help, Sladowicz stared in pure horror, much like me, as the hole in the body kept gushing out blood and shaking uncontrollably. Eventually, the blood stopped gushing, but then...
he seemed to get sick by the memory alone.
It started splatting and dropping muscles and bones, and much of the man's organs kept falling down from the hole as the two people inside the room panicked and shook in its corner. At this point, both me and the doctor were horrified, unable to move or say anything as that horrifying vision unfolded. I thought that because I avoided the war, I was going to live by without that. But there would be more. As the body hollowed, something seemed to move under its skin, making bumps much like a child under a blanket. It was a vision of hell. And out of where Markwell's head was stuck, a hand, a manically laughing hand, pale as a corpse and veiny as an unborn. It shook in all directions as it tumbled itself inside the boy. We had no words. We still don't.
From memory alone, one could see the man's anxiety and unsettledness. He was going to dark places. But it wasn't the kind that stops.
We watched as the apparition brought what remained of Markwell up, breaking with ease its restraints and hunched it into an arc with its belly up. There was nothing but awe for us outside of the room. But for Sladovich, the creature in a single motion was now over him, as it used its host to club him, hitting him and pinning him down. The hand, or as the doctor corrected me, the extraterrestrial, hit his throat with surgical precision. We were both gasping as we watched it pull out the man's throat, laughing all the way through. It wasn't aiming to kill him. It just wanted to see him trying to scream. Tried and failed miserably as it mauled him repeatedly, each hit more damaging than the last, but never letting Sladovich's consciousness go. We could see it in his eyes as the pain escalated more and more, and for a second it was almost as if he was looking directly at Jankowski. Eventually, the extraterrestrial stopped, but only when there was absolutely nothing left of both Sladovich's mind or body that was able to sense suffering at any level. That thing, it had to be the devil incarnate, the devil's left hand, straight out from outer space.
The general seemed zoned out. He had gotten to look back into the camera, but his expression was visibly uncanny.
We couldn't look at it any longer. We ran off into the room as the monstrosity was making its way towards the doctor's other assistant. As soon as we got outside, we found ourselves barricading both doors with the chairs and couches from the leisure room. A couple of doors down the corridor, we could hear a solitary scream, followed by tumbling and gutting sounds. Only a handful of things chilling as that. But as I was caught by the madness that went inside, I didn't quite get to notice. Where were my other men? Where were Dr. Jankowski's other 4 assistants? It had been at least 1 hour that we spent inside of that room, observing hell itself. And at that moment, it just dawned on us. There would be a couple other of those things on the loose.